Today we're going to talk about the H-3 Nozzlenose in Salmon Run. In this series I break down weapons and how to use them in Salmon Run. The videos are short and they don't cover absolutely everything about a weapon. I just aim to make you feel a little bit more knowledgeable when playing Salmon Run. Number 1. The H-3 Nozzlenose is a middleweight semi-automatic shooter that is the heavy counterpart to the L3. In comparison to the L3, the H-3 is more powerful with its burst of free shots, but comes with the downside of being slower to move and slower to fire. Number 2. As for base stats, the H-3 is one of the strongest shooters in the game currently, with 70 damage per shot. When you land all 3 shots on one target, you'll hit for 210 damage. Unfortunately, in Salmon Run you don't get the cool sound you do for PvP, but practicing hitting all 3 shots on one target is a must to get the most out of this weapon. The issue with the H-3 is that to offset its high damage per shot, it has a slow fire rate and slow movement. It takes 20 frames to fire another burst, and when you do fire, you feel like you're stuck in mud. Therefore, it is so important to incorporate jumping into the way you use this weapon, as this will give you more freedom with aiming and arcing your shots. However, just to make things more tricky, there's a good chance that your shots may deviate from the intended target because of the jump RNG with this weapon. After firing, there is a 25 frame cooldown before you can start recovering ink, which feels like a bit of a lifetime sometimes. Its painting ability is fine, nothing special, and each burst of shots use about 6%, so you do have the ability to cover yourself for turf. Its range is quite nice too, being able to outrange almost all other shooters. There's a lot to dislike with the H-3, but I also feel like it's worth praising this weapon where it's due. It hits consistently hard, has good range to cover all comps, and doesn't have a terrible ink tank. Take those wins where you can. Number 3. Given the H-3's damage and range, it does well against almost every boss. There isn't a single boss that you'll struggle against. The main issue will come when you don't have space or freedom to move. Like any other shooter on the slower side, you'll need to use distance and pacing to your advantage. Learn when to kill early to prevent becoming overwhelmed, and learn when you can bring in spawns closer to the basket. Like other weapons with decent range, you'll need to prioritise steelheads, as you may be the only player who can reach them safely. You can't cycle them with one burst of shots, you'll need 2 bursts at minimum, so learning when to shoot to time this right is crucial. Stingers and fish sticks are 2 bosses to also prioritise due to how quickly they can be defeated with the H-3. Each stinger pot is 60 HP, meaning each shot from your H-3 can take one out. If you aim and jump with your firing, you can take out 3 pots at a time. For fish sticks, the H-3 can reach them from the ground. You're a bit vulnerable when doing this, so be mindful of your surroundings. It's easier not to jump too, to help with aim consistency. Other bosses don't pressure the H-3 too much, with potentially the exception of things like moors, drizzlers and flyfish, due to the slow movement of the H-3. Again, this requires some foresight with current bosses on the field and ink management with your weapon. Having multiple of these on the map will make your life hell, so do yourself a favour and kill them early or consider special usage. And finally, the same actually applies to all lessers. Not inherently dangerous to the H-3 at surface level, but something to always be conscious of due to the way they can prevent your movement and take over the turf. You can't quickly shred through them, so stay on top of them and make sure you don't get backed into a corner. Number 4. Some weapons require efficient timing with to get the most out of. Firing in bursts of 3, you'll want to make sure all 3 shots account for something. Whether this is unloading into a group of lessers or timing your shots to match a steelhead cycle, it's important to get used to this weapon as a separate entity rather than viewing it through the lens of a shooter. I'd recommend practicing on enemies such as stingers and fish sticks to get a feel for jumping and timing with this weapon. Given its slow rate of fire, I would advise to be cautious if you're struggling with this weapon. Do not put yourself in risky situations and make sure you have turf around you to back out. You're a bit sticky when using this weapon, slow to fire and slow to recover ink. I also think it's worth mentioning that even though the L3 is its sister weapon, they vary in so many stats that it's really not worth comparing the two outside of the obvious similarities. Yes, they're both nozzle noses, but the H-3 cannot be used the way you want to use the L3, which can be used a lot more liberally with paint spam and movement. The H-3 requires you to patiently wait out your target and to create space. There is a rhythm to its firing, and overextending or spamming shots will just leave you vulnerable to damage whilst misunderstanding the weapon entirely. Number 5. When I first picked up Splatoon in 2016, I immediately turned off motion controls. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I just couldn't get the hang of it, and so I didn't try. Fast forward to 2020 and I start streaming and I find out it's me who is the weird one for using stick controls. All this to say, I never liked the H-3 when I used sticks. I found it clunky, slow, and really difficult to use. I couldn't quite hit the timing with the shots and I always struggled to move when firing. I remember one of my viewers commented once that when I use the H-3, I use splat bombs more than the weapon itself, a testament to how much I tried to actually avoid using it. Having been on both sides of the sticks versus motion debate, I feel like the H-3 was made with motion controls in mind. When you combine moving with jumping and then with shooting and then aiming, maybe it was a skill issue on my part, but the H-3 feels much easier to play now I use motion. With how restrictive in movement the H-3 is, it felt as though limiting yourself to stick controls made the weapon even worse. Now that I have movement via motion, I have more freedom with aiming and jumping. I made the switch to motion controls in December 2021. It took me about 5 years to get to that point, so I don't judge or lament anybody for playing sticks. The game is meant to be enjoyed after all, that's the main takeaway. But I can tell you that I enjoy using the H-3 a hell of a lot more now that I use motion controls. I know this is subjective and not objective advice. However, I wouldn't share it if I didn't think it was helpful. I hope this video helps you appreciate the H-3 a little more. Let me know what you think. I'll see you guys soon.